I had been on the station long enough to know two universal truths. First, no one ever labels doors correctly. Second, if something says restricted, it's usually restricted to people who actually read signs. I was not one of those people. I was an engineer, which meant my natural enemy was malfunctioning equipment, not social nuance. When the corridor alert pinged about a thermal imbalance near the Vulpine diplomatic wing, I did what any responsible human would do, sighed, grabbed my toolkit, and walked straight toward the problem without checking who might be on the other side of the door. The panel showed green. Green meant safe. Green meant accessible. Green did not, apparently, mean you are about to commit an interspecies faux pas that will follow you for the rest of your life. I knocked out of habit, waited half a second out of optimism, and let the door slide open because that's what doors do when you're carrying tools and confidence. I stepped in mid-thought, already rehearsing my standard apology for being late, only to have every word die somewhere between my brain and my mouth. The room was quiet in that heavy, charged way that feels like the universe just leaned forward to watch. The Vulpine woman turned toward me slowly, not startled, not scrambling, just present. Her fur was in the middle of what I later learned was a recalibration process, which is a very professional term for being decidedly not ready for company. Layers that were normally sleek and orderly were loosened, fluffed, exposed in a way that felt deeply personal even before I understood why. My brain short-circuited into pure human instinct: avert eyes, apologize, retreat. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to, this door wasn't marked, I gestured vaguely backward, already taking a step away like gravity itself was offended by my presence. I kept my gaze fixed on a neutral point somewhere above her shoulder, because humans have a long cultural tradition of pretending that if we don't look directly at a problem, it might forgive us. She didn't shout. She didn't cover herself. She didn't even move. Instead, her tail stilled completely, ears angling forward with unnerving precision. Her breathing slowed, then matched mine, which made me acutely aware of the fact that I was breathing far too loudly. The silence stretched just long enough for me to realize that I was still inside the room, the door still open behind me, my foot hovering in that awkward space between staying and leaving. "You saw," she said calmly. "I didn't," I replied immediately, which was a lie in the same way tripping over something invisible is still tripping. "I mean, I did, but not on purpose, and not properly, and definitely not in any official capacity." That was when she smiled. Not a playful smile. Not an embarrassed one. A solemn, almost reverent expression that made my stomach drop for reasons I couldn't yet articulate. Her ears tilted back slightly, a gesture that felt ceremonial rather than emotional. "Then fate has acted," she said. I blinked. Once. Twice. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that? Slower? Maybe with subtitles?" "You entered during vulnerability," she continued, utterly unbothered by my visible distress. "You witnessed the unguarded state. You did not flee in panic. Destiny has acknowledged you." Every word sounded clear. The sentence made no sense. I defaulted to my usual coping mechanism, assumed the translator was broken. "Okay. That's probably a cultural expression. Or a metaphor. Or a saying that doesn't quite map to English. I'm just going to step out, and we can all pretend this was a maintenance ghost." I took another step back. The door did not close. Of course it didn't. The universe, it seemed, was committed to this moment. She tilted her head, studying me with open curiosity, not embarrassment. If anything, she looked satisfied. "You cannot undo an invitation by retreating," she said gently. "I did not invite anything," I said, voice cracking just a little. "I was responding to a heat fluctuation." Her ears twitched. "Yes. A rise was detected." "That's not—" I stopped myself. The phrasing was already betraying me. I cleared my throat. "Look, I don't know how things work for Vulpines, but for humans, walking in on someone changing is considered extremely rude, not destiny." "For us," she replied, "it is both." Something in her tone made my skin prickle. Not fear. Not attraction. A sense of standing on cultural thin ice while wearing shoes made of confusion. You're telling me that because I accidentally opened a door at the wrong time, I've, what? Triggered something? You crossed the threshold, she said. That is sufficient. That feels like a design flaw. She seemed amused by that, tail flicking once in a way that felt dangerously confident. Many humans say this. That should have concerned me more than it did. Okay. Let's pause. I didn't prepare for anything. I didn't follow any ritual. I didn't even make eye contact properly. Surely intent matters. Intent is unreliable, she said. Circumstance is honest. I glanced back at the door, then at my toolkit, as if one of them might explain how my day had gone so wrong so quickly. There should really be better warning signs. There are, she replied. They are internal. That doesn't help anyone else, I muttered. She took a small step closer, still composed, still entirely unconcerned with the fact that I was internally filing an incident report for my own sanity. You appeared distressed. I walked in on someone changing in an alien embassy, I said. Distressed is me being polite. Her gaze softened, just slightly. It is customary to congratulate the chosen. I don't feel chosen, I said. I feel like I forgot to read a manual. Fate rarely provides manuals, she replied. Only moments. That was when it hit me. This wasn't embarrassment on her part. This wasn't anger. This was certainty. The kind that doesn't argue because it doesn't believe there's anything left to debate. My species solves problems by talking them to death. Hers, apparently, solved them by accepting that the universe had opinions. Listen, I said carefully, choosing each word like it might explode. I respect your culture. Truly. But from my perspective, this was an accident. Her smile widened, slow and deliberate. Yes, she said. The purest kind. She stepped back, finally allowing the door to slide shut behind me with a soft hiss. The sound echoed far louder than it should have. As I stood alone in the corridor, toolkit still in hand, heart racing for reasons I didn't fully understand, one final thought settled in with dreadful clarity. Somewhere, somehow, I had just been selected for something I had not applied for. And I was fairly certain there were no warning signs anywhere in the galaxy that could have prepared me for that. I stood in the corridor for a full 10 seconds after the door closed, staring at my reflection in the polished metal wall like it might explain what had just happened. My face looked the same. No glowing marks. No cosmic symbols. Just a human engineer holding a toolkit, and the sinking realization that I had somehow offended fate by doing my job. I took a breath, adjusted my grip, and decided the only reasonable response was to pretend none of it had occurred. That plan lasted exactly 6 steps. My comm pinged. Then pinged again. Then vibrated like it was trying to escape my pocket. The first message was from station operations, flagged urgent. The second was from diplomatic services, flagged extremely urgent. The third was from someone labeled Cultural Liaison, Vulpine, which felt excessive given that I'd met exactly one Vulpine in the last 5 minutes, and she'd already decided my future. I opened the operations message first. It was short, which is never good. Please report immediately. You have been identified as the initiating party in a cross-species bonding event. I reread it twice. Initiating party. Bonding event. Those were not words that should ever appear in a sentence about me. I typed back the only honest response I had. There has been a misunderstanding involving a door. No reply. As I walked, I started noticing the looks. Conversation stopped when I passed. An avian diplomat tilted her head and whispered something behind a wing. A pair of reptilians stared openly, eyes narrowing with what I could only describe as professional curiosity. One of them nodded at me, slow and respectful, like I'd just completed a dangerous ritual rather than tripped over bad timing. By the time I reached the administrative wing, rumors had already outpaced me. A human intern I barely knew leaned in as I passed. Is it true? She whispered. Did you really activate a Vulpine? I activated a door, I said. The door was aggressive. She stared at me like I was being modest. That was new and deeply uncomfortable. Diplomatic services didn't bother with small talk. They sat me down in a room that smelled faintly of antiseptic and bad decisions, slid a tablet across the table, and asked me to confirm whether I had knowingly entered a state of shared vulnerability with a Vulpine citizen. The phrasing alone made my ears burn. I entered a room, I said slowly, with faulty sensors. The translator rendered this, and the room went quiet. The liaison, a calm, many-eyed being who looked like it had never laughed in its life, folded its hands. Intent is not a required component, it said. Only presence, exposure, and acknowledgement. I acknowledged nothing, I said. I apologized and tried to leave, which is considered dignified acceptance. I closed my eyes. Somewhere in the universe, irony was having a very good day. They explained it to me with diagrams. That somehow made it worse. Vulpines, it turned out, believed fate revealed compatibility through moments of unguarded truth. Not planned encounters. Not rituals with candles and chanting. Accidents. Stumbles. Unexpected entries. If someone saw you when you were not prepared to be seen, and stayed long enough to register you as a person rather than an object, that moment carried weight. And you remained, the liaison said gently, for less than 3 seconds. Time is relative, it replied. The tablet chimed. A new form appeared. Accidental Courtship Disclosure. Version 12. I stared at it, jaw slack. You have a form for this? Yes, the liaison said. Humans are not the first to be surprised by Vulpine customs. That didn't help. If anything, it implied there was a list somewhere, and I was now on it. Words spread faster than explanations ever do. By the time I left the office, the story had evolved. I hadn't walked in by mistake. I'd sensed destiny. I hadn't apologized. I'd asserted quiet confidence. I hadn't tried to leave. I'd lingered to establish dominance. Every awkward human instinct was being reinterpreted as calculated intent. A Vulpine merchant inclined her head as I passed. Bold, she said approvingly. I tripped over a floor seam, I muttered. Another alien, tall and gelatinous, waved a pseudopod at me. Humans initiate without warning, it gurgled to a companion. Fascinating strategy. I ducked into a maintenance alcove just to breathe. My reflection stared back again, looking no more prepared for destiny than it had 20 minutes ago. This is a mistake, I told myself. This will get cleared up. That was when she found me. She approached without sound, which felt unfair. One moment I was alone. The next, her presence filled the narrow space, calm and certain. She looked composed now, for settled, posture relaxed. If she was affected by the station-wide commotion, she didn't show it. You are avoiding, she observed. I'm processing, I said. There's a difference. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Processing is acceptable. But you should know that many are watching. That's worse. Not for you, she said. Humans gain reputation quickly. I don't want a reputation, I said. I want better signage. A flicker of amusement crossed her face. You continue to underestimate the moment. I understand the moment, I said. I just don't agree with it. She tilted her head. That is very human. We stood there, the tension less sharp now, replaced by something complicated. Curiosity, maybe. Expectation. The weight of a misunderstanding that had grown legs and started sprinting around the station. You believe fate has spoken, I said. Yes. I believe fate needs a consent form. She considered that. Your kind believes choice refines destiny. Exactly, I said. We don't ignore accidents. We just don't let them decide everything. For the first time since I'd opened that door, she hesitated. Just a fraction. Enough to make my heart slow. Then perhaps, she said carefully, This is not the end of the moment, but the beginning of its examination. I exhaled, relief and dread mixing in equal measure. Around us, the station buzzed with speculation, rules being drafted, customs being questioned. All because I'd walked in at the wrong time and refused to panic properly. Somehow, humanity's greatest contribution to galactic diplomacy was shaping up to be this: we didn't conquer fate. We argued with it. And apparently that was far more disruptive than anyone had expected. By the time the station council summoned me, I had already rehearsed my explanation so many times it felt like a confession memorized by muscle memory. I hadn't planned anything. I hadn't intended anything. I certainly hadn't initiated anything. Unfortunately, none of those statements carried the weight I was used to in a place where accidents were sacred and intent was considered optional. The council chamber was arranged in a wide circle, which I quickly realized meant there would be no safe corner to retreat into. Representatives from half a dozen species watched me with open fascination. Some looked amused. Others looked wary. A few looked impressed, which made my skin crawl. The Vulpine woman stood opposite me, calm as ever, her posture relaxed in a way that suggested she was already comfortable with how this would end. The presiding counselor began without ceremony. You acknowledge entry during a state of vulnerability. I acknowledge a door malfunction, I said. A ripple of murmurs moved through the chamber. The counselor inclined its head. You remained. For less time than it takes to sneeze. You observed. I accidentally registered visual data, I said, clinging to technical language like a flotation device. The Vulpine woman's tail flicked once, slow and deliberate. You did not avert yourself immediately. I did, I said. Not fast enough to undo physics. That earned a few quiet clicks of amusement from the insected delegation. The counselor raised a limb for silence. Human, it said. Do you dispute that the moment occurred? No, I said. I dispute that it means what you think it means. That, finally, changed the tone. Curiosity sharpened into interest. The Vulpine woman's ears angled toward me, not in challenge, but attention. I straightened my shoulders. This was familiar ground. Not destiny or ritual, but disagreement. Humans excelled at that. In my culture, I continued, accidents happen constantly. Doors open when they shouldn't. People see things they didn't plan to see. We don't treat those moments as commands from the universe. We treat them as data points. Incomplete ones. Incomplete, the counselor repeated. Yes, I said. You saw vulnerability. I saw embarrassment. Neither of those equals commitment on their own. A low murmur spread. The Vulpine woman stepped forward slightly. But the accident revealed truth, she said. You saw without preparation. I was seen without defense. And then, I said, meeting her gaze, we both reacted honestly. I panicked. You accepted. That's not fate choosing. That's two people responding differently to the same surprise. The chamber went quiet. Even the counselor paused. You suggest, it said slowly, that fate requires interpretation. I suggest, I replied, that fate starts conversations. It doesn't finish them. The phrase hung in the air. I hadn't planned it, but it felt right. Humans didn't deny chance. We just refused to let it make unilateral decisions. We negotiated with the universe the same way we negotiated with each other, awkwardly, verbally, and with a lot of clarifying questions. The Vulpine woman studied me, her expression unreadable. In our history, she said, those chosen by accident who rejected the bond brought imbalance. Did they reject the person? I asked. Or the assumption? That stopped her. Just for a second. Enough to matter. I am not rejecting you, I said carefully. I don't even know you well enough to do that responsibly. I'm rejecting the idea that one unintended entry defines everything that follows. A few council members shifted. The avian delegate ruffled its feathers thoughtfully. The gelatinous representative pulsed in what I was starting to recognize as agreement. You would delay fate, the counselor said. I'd examine it, I replied. Humans believe that what you do after the accident matters more than the accident itself. The Vulpine woman's tail lowered slightly, tension easing. You would have me believe choice refines destiny. Yes, I said. And consent makes it meaningful. That word landed hard. Even translated, its weight carried. The chamber reacted in a dozen subtle ways. Silence thickened. The counselor leaned back, considering. In human bonding, it asked, vulnerability alone is insufficient? On its own? I said. It's just exposure. What matters is what you choose to do once you realize you've been seen. The Vulpine woman's gaze softened. And what would you choose now? Every eye turned to me. The pressure was immense, but it was a familiar kind. Not ritual. Not destiny. A decision point. Humans lived at those. I choose, I said slowly, to acknowledge the moment without letting it trap us. To admit curiosity without obligation. To continue, with awareness. A few council members exchanged looks. The insectoids clicked rapidly. The avian delegate bobbed its head. You offer a conditional continuation, the counselor said. I offer a warning sign, I replied. After the fact. Something like laughter rippled through the room. Even the Vulpine woman's lips curved faintly. You are strange, she said. I've been told, I said. The counselor raised its limb again. This council recognizes the uniqueness of human interpretive customs. We will not enforce a binding fate without mutual reaffirmation. Relief washed through me so fast my knees nearly gave out. The Vulpine woman exhaled softly, a sound that carried no disappointment, only contemplation. So, she said quietly, stepping closer, we are unbound. For now, I said. But not uninvolved. Her ears tilted, thoughtful. This is acceptable. The council formally dismissed us moments later, already murmuring about amendments and cultural addendums. As we walked out side by side, the station buzzed around us, alive with rumors and recalibrations. You challenge fate, she said as we reached the corridor. I challenge the assumption, I corrected. Fate can handle a few questions. She regarded me for a long moment, then nodded. Perhaps that is why humans unsettled the galaxy. Probably, I said. We keep asking what happens next. She smiled then, not solemn, not ceremonial. Curious. Real. Then, she said, what happens next? I glanced at the corridor, at the doors, at the warning panels already being hastily installed. Next, I said, we talk. On purpose. And for the first time since I'd walked through the wrong door at the wrong time, the idea didn't feel like an accident at all. The station had barely returned to normal when the new rules hit the comms. Notices about proper etiquette, privacy protocols, and cross-species accident reporting were posted everywhere, but the phrasing made it clear humans were the problem. I read one aloud to myself. All personnel must respect unguarded states. Inadvertent witnesses are to be noted, not removed. Somehow, that sounded like a compliment disguised as a warning. I walked through the corridors, toolkit in hand, and noticed the subtle changes. Aliens who had once glanced at me with curiosity now nodded with a mix of respect and caution. Even the interns whispered less about the accidental activation. I imagined my reputation growing like some ridiculous legend, fueled by a single misstep and an unwavering refusal to panic. It was absurd. I was absurd. And yet, somehow, effective. The Vulpine woman approached me, her posture casual but precise. Her fur was fully adjusted now, tail flicking gently, ears angled for observation. She didn't glare, she didn't scold, she just walked with the certainty of someone who knew how things should unfold. You've created quite a stir, she said. Human customs are disruptive. I shrugged, which might have been the wrong move. We call it efficiency, I said. We don't let a moment decide everything. We examine it, discuss it, and only then act. She tilted her head. Discussion. That is, unexpected. Most humans do it poorly, I said. I'm an exception. That earned a soft, almost imperceptible chuckle from her, which was rare enough to feel like victory. We continued down the corridor, either speaking for a moment, yet both aware that the eyes of the station followed. Every subtle movement, the way I carried my toolkit, the way she adjusted her fur, was noted, catalogued, and whispered about in ways I didn't want to imagine. For the first time, I realized being human was less about physical prowess or technology, and more about unpredictability in diplomacy. Accidentally bold, unintentionally honest, completely capable of confusing an entire species. A group of council members passed by. They paused, observing, exchanging quiet signals. The Vulpine woman glanced at me and raised an eyebrow. I raised mine back, conveying exactly what I wanted without words. We're walking this path on our own terms. She nodded, and her tail flicked in approval. Even without explicit action, there was understanding, consent implied, curiosity respected. We reached the observation deck overlooking the station's central hub. I took a breath, the weight of the past events pressing on me. So this is it? I asked. Station-wide reputation, accidental notoriety, destiny momentarily paused. Yes, she said softly. And yet we move forward with intention. The phrasing, simple as it was, carried all the complexity of the situation. Accident acknowledged, choice respected, curiosity honored. I laughed quietly. Humans don't conquer with ceremony. We stumble into influence, trip over protocol, and somehow leave a mark. She regarded me thoughtfully, the corners of her mouth lifting ever so slightly. It seems effective, she said. Perhaps too effective. Effectiveness isn't always planned, I said. Mostly it's accidental, like today. But we're learning. The double meaning was intentional, and I could see her considering it. She understood both layers, and that understanding mattered more than any formal ritual. For the first time, I felt calm. The council had ruled, the station adapted, the rules adjusted, and yet the moment wasn't lost. We had acknowledged it, explored it, and allowed it to inform the future rather than dictate it. I realized that this, more than any machinery or protocol, was the human advantage, reasoning in the face of chaos, negotiating with uncertainty, and turning accidents into progress. She stepped closer, the soft sound of her movement barely audible over the hum of the station. And now? She asked. No, I said. We continue. With awareness, not obligation. Curiosity, not compulsion. Conversation, not conclusion. Her ears twitched in agreement. Then humanity has its way again, she said. Unpredictable, bold, and undeniably influential. Exactly, I replied. And apparently, terrifyingly effective. We stood together, overlooking the hub, aware of the eyes and whispers, the rules and protocols, the accidental history being recorded for future reference. Somehow, despite the chaos, despite the misunderstandings and cultural hazards, it felt right. Not fated, not dictated, but human, messy, clever, bold, and entirely alive. The station continued to hum around us, oblivious to the personal reputations being forged. We didn't need approval, we didn't need to follow scripts. We had negotiated fate in the only way humans knew how, by walking through the moment, asking questions, and refusing to let a single accidental step define everything. And somewhere in that balance between accident and choice, curiosity and consent, we found a strange, satisfying clarity. I adjusted my toolkit, prepared for the next unintended consequence, and allowed myself a small, private smile. Humans had a strange way of handling destiny, but it worked. The Vulpine woman glanced at me once more, ears angled, tail flicking. She understood that the story was far from over, but for now, the rules had shifted, the moment survived, and the future, uncertain, complicated, and slightly absurd, awaited us.